Whenever you are ready. Yes, absolutely, whenever you are ready.
Do we have a time? Does somebody, are you stopping us at a certain time?
We're going to give you, my goal would be that each of you would not take more than like 3 minutes.
Oh, so we're going around.
It's however, you can do it randomly or just, in a circle. It's up to you. And if you don't have anything to contribute, that's fine as well. Okay? So it's however you choose.
Do you guys want to go around and just share one at a time, or do you want to dialogue?
Just randomly.
I have to say, I love this idea. I loved doing the sets last year, and I think that it provides such a good number, percentage, and implementation score, and I think that it's a great idea to do this for UDL since it is 50% of our knowledge. That being said, I do have other things, but
To piggyback on that, I wrote down something about schools and teachers having access to this so that it's more focused on what they need to have observable. Because I think teachers really would be thankful to have something that spells this out a little bit better in clear language for them. UDL, this is what we're expecting to see.
So you're saying, so your thought is that they actually see this?
Yes,
I
so that they
wrote that on
know.
here, that this needs to be shared with administrators and department leaders, because I was telling Chelsea and Jill that I have a couple new teachers at North that I'm working with, and one who was asking her students to respond to a discussion question, and she gave them 2 ways to do it. They could either write down their answer and submit it that way, or they could participate through today's meet. And her department chair happened to do a walkthrough on that day and told her that she had too many options.
Whoa.
And I was not happy about that. And I thought for a new teacher, she has somebody like me who's in a support role telling her, this is good practice, this is what you're doing, you're removing barriers, and then she has the person who actually signs her off on her evaluation saying, that's not how we do it, one or the other. So I think that this needs to be shared with building administrators and building level leaders.
And see, I think teachers too, if this is what people are going to be looking for in their classrooms, they need to realize that and help them get a focus, because there is so much to get a focus on. This is being important. This is what we want to see. This is what you should be doing. This is the best practice, the expectation.
I agree. I think if you're a teacher in the classroom, you need to know the expectations. And if these are the expectations, then they need to have it clearly stated so that they know what they're supposed to be doing.
Those are my questions on, in the UDL row at the very top, are the 3 principles and the 9 guidelines displayed in the learning environment? I don't know that teachers have been told that needs to happen
On there at the very building expectations.
Yeah,
That's what
and
I got
then
too.
on the back, same with expert learner qualities. I think those are great ideas, but I don't know if that's been a clear communicated expectation. So, that kind of thing is such a bummer to be like, I didn't even know I was supposed to do this, and now it's docked. And then kind of along those lines, if you don't see something, and maybe you can answer with the sets, if you don't see something in observation, is it just a no, or do you have a conversation later, or dig?
I guess that's how it is. I mean, right, you do the set. Like,
But the
if
thing
it's
is-
not there, it's not there.
But the thing is, with a set, you're looking for it's more, do they have this posted? Do they have the expectations posted? Do they do this? It's not as much reliant on what is the teacher doing at that time. You're literally looking at the environment.
Because this isn't the best example, but today's meet might just be a given that it's always a back channel that's open, but the teacher, depending on when you go, maybe doesn't explicitly say, oh, if you want to reply on today's meet, you can, because that's part of the built-in learning environment. So just some of that stuff that might be there, but you might not see it without digging.
That's what Jill was talking about, and what we talked about back there was just, is there a certain amount of time or a percentage of classrooms that need to be visited when you go to a school? Because, you can't say a number of classrooms, because 10 classrooms at Lincoln would be classroom, but 10 at North wouldn't really give that clear of a picture. And so, you know, to be sure, because if you just pop into 3 random classrooms, you might not see.
I put down, Kate, a similar thing of yours, and I wrote down, does the observee have the opportunity to point out how they addressed all these things because the observer might have not noticed something, which could easily happen.
But then it is building wide, it's not the personal teacher's
Right.
evaluation, so it's,
You-
I think it's important to make that distinction.
You would see it in that one.
I have a question as to whether all of these things that the teachers are supposed to have posted now, once we get past a couple of those, it just becomes wallpaper in the background. Is there a way to simplify that and have one poster, one thing that is standard in every classroom, every building, as opposed to 15 different
Well, the
things that look
new-
different in every single building?
The new SWLO posters that I think they finally got yesterday are gonna address many of these questions because they're gonna have the principles on them, the guidelines on them, the expert learner on them, the student. I mean, if the student is asked, like on all these things,
So
to
could
show
that
that
be put in here, though?
they could
That
point to
as long as
that.
they have the school learning outcomes poster up, you're good?
well, and then.
Or do we have to keep, even though we have that, we have to put this
Another
up,
one
we have
for
to put
this.
this one up and this one up, and
I think, again, if the student, maybe they can't say them all, but if they're asked one of these questions, like, you know, if they can report, I think it said, if they can go up and point to that for the 3 principles, for the guidelines, for, you know, how do they, you know, represent things, what actions do they have available to them?
And are you gonna put that in multiple languages too?
There you go.
I mean, Taylorsville, we have in Richards, we have 5 or 6 kids that speak no English.
And
Is that
I think
accessible to them if it's just in English?
all
And
schools
we'll
are like that
account it's on
anymore.
the computer, like some teachers are posting them on the Chromebooks, they know where to click, they review. Does that count as opposed to?
Even though it's
wall?
not on the wall.
Right.
Well, my thing
Good
is though,
point.
you know, it says, are the 3 principles and 9 guidelines displayed in the learning environment? But is the goal that they're just hanging on the wall? Because that doesn't really do anything.
Well, no, but the students are asked to report on them,
Right.
almost every one.
Right, but like for this question, are they displayed in the learning environment? You just want them to hang on the wall? Because,
Or be an interactive
And
tool.
there is some element of the step that is just that, right? Where we're looking to see, is there signage
Signage.
down on locker level at ease? Is there signage
Right.
in the cafeteria at ease? I mean, so is that might, I mean, I don't know, maybe that is just part where that's what we're looking for, like that is.
That's step one.
It's
The
either
next
yes
step
or
would
right.
be,
Right.
then are they interacting?
Right.
Interacting with it, can they discuss it, can they explain it?
Well-
Is there an interactive tool that they utilize? Are there other means of representation of those things?
I had some questions about that. When you list in the data source artifact, you know, when you start listing video, demonstration, guest speaker, I think those are good and it's things to look for, but it becomes more of a checklist when really the goal is it a comprehensive UDL learning environment? And so that was kind of a shift I had to make in my mind, that you want to move beyond just, as a teacher, well, I gave them this option and this option. Well, if they're crappy options, it's not really fulfilling UDL implementation.
Or if
So-
there are options that the kids don't really know how to access.
Right.
But I kind of liked having those off to the side though,
Really?
because it made my brain shift to, okay, this is what I'm looking for.
It could be anything.
So, yeah.
Even just
Kinda keep
adding like,
focused.
et cetera, maybe,
Oh, yeah.
like, it's not
Yeah, definitely.
limited to these, that's, I don't know.
Sure.
I have a lot of like nitty gritty type things.
I was wondering
that
too
I
if
can
we
just
could
give them.
combine the action and expression. I felt like that was repetitive at times.
I thought, not necessarily even repetitive, but just kind of confusing, like, are there 4 guidelines, are there 3?
Yeah.
Because they were separated.
And then can reflection even from the back tie into this specific guideline? So the ones on the back, can we incorporate those into the guidelines that they would fall under? So we just have a few more. If this is a UDL tool, how can we put those under the guidelines they fall under, for the most part?
And I know this is drafts too, but I love when the 3 guidelines are color-coded, like the pink, green, or purple, green, blue.
Let's make this UDL.
Yeah.
I have a comment about EL learners, and I know that having all the options makes it understood that you're providing things for everyone, including EL learners, but I kind of wonder if there should be some nod to EL learners in here someplace, because it's just becoming such a big issue in our schools.
So you see that in variability,
But maybe,
And even under goal, it says, is it accessible? To me, that, is it accessible to all students? So is it in both languages?
and that's what I wrote down. I mean, yes, it's understood that that includes all learners, but I think that we need to be more deliberate about making sure, I mean, not that it needs to be everywhere, but there needs to be a nod here someplace to that.
So do you think just adding all students instead of, I think, I don't know about just pulling out and saying EL students.
No, I don't think we
that's.
should do that.
No, but, I don't
I
know.
think
I
if
know where
we
you're
use
coming
some
from, but-
language that is part of kind of the EL instructional piece, you know, some of the things like comprehensible input and scaffolding, which I know is on here, but it's very vague. I think is scaffolding evident? What does that mean? How does, you know, if we had, you know, how is scaffolding evident, or what, you know, what is the scaffolding, and do the students know that the scaffolding is there? I mean, if we could use some of maybe the language around EL instruction, in some of these things, that, you know, that might be a little more clear for teachers.
The only issue I would see with if you change this to how is scaffolding evident
Yeah.
is that then
Exactly.
you're putting in, you're asking for a description here.
Right.
And this is simply, is scaffolding evident, yes or no, so you can score it.
Okay, that makes sense. So just, if there's some way that we could be more specific with the classrooms that have the ELs in them.
Maybe under the one that was barriers, scaffolding evident for a variety of learners, and you could, you know, list a couple of options, not just EL, but IEP, 504, et cetera.
So it says, is scaffolding evident to support learner variability? And then in parentheses, you could put EL, IEP,
504,
AP,
what,
advanced
AP,
placement.
there you go, you know.
Yes.
So to jog people's minds, not only the teachers whose rooms are going to be observed, but also the observers of, this is the kind of stuff we're looking for. So that it's a little bit more, oh yeah.
I wonder too if there should even just be a teacher question, can the teacher explain learner variability? Is there questions, is it supported? But I don't know that all teachers know that they really need to understand what that term means.
I like that question. The thing though that I have written down in that support category is, it says, can the teacher identify, and then has the teacher been provided? And then like if you did something that was, can the teacher define learner variability or something like that? The way in the set that those are worded is like 90% of staff can da-da-da-da-da, or this percentage of the staff or more can da-da-da. And so I think that it would be something to maybe consider changing on this one to having it, rather than just saying the teacher, because then you're going to that one teacher and it's not giving that comprehensive view.
Can staff.
Right, can this percentage of the staff or more respond to something?
And the percentage piece is more measurable than
Right.
yes or no.
Right.
You could not turn that into percentage.
I have in the expert learner category, I have the first one and the last one. Is there evidence that the characteristics have been taught? And then are the characteristics displayed in the learning environment? Is there a way that those could be combined?
Or displayed and
Because evidence is something that you're just looking for.
To me, hasn't been taught would be like if you're seeing kids refer to it or talk about it, or
So then how long is
Interact.
this snapshot going to be? Because if you're gonna be in there waiting for kids to do that, you
those are two separate questions.
That's,
I mean, the
think that would
evidence
be-
is, you can see it on the wall, but
So
has
the
it,
evidence-
has it been taught? Maybe hasn't been taught isn't
I
a
don't-
question.
What you just said though was the evidence is that you can see it on the wall, and that was the two different questions.
Well, that's what I'm saying. To me, they're two separate things.
I don't see how you can measure, or how you would know whether
It's
those
been taught or
characteristics
not.
have been taught. I just don't know.
Unless you saw kids.
Right.
But even then, it doesn't necessarily mean they were taught.
On the set, are there, well, true, but on the set, are there some questions you just ask the administrator?
There's an administrative interview
Well,
that you
that's why I wonder
do.
if that piece would be a student interview, because the reality is, once students start regularly assessing themselves on school-wide learning outcomes, a brief conversation with a student would, or with a number of students would give you.
You'll know.
So the components of the
way
set,
to
there's,
answer that question.
there's a certain amount of student interviews that you conduct, there's an administrative interview, and then there's the walkthrough. And you take that, all of those, and that's where, when it says here in score, like this line item, the score may come from specifically that administrative interview, or this one may come from the teacher-student interview, or something like that. There's teacher interviews also.
I wondered if school-wide learning outcome needed to be somehow added with expert learner, because I think some teachers are gonna be using that.
I
You know-
agree.
You know what I
We
mean? Because
are
you
more-
said if you ask a kid, how have you been taught to be an expert learner? They might deer in headlights when you say, how have you looked at your school-wide learning outcome? You know what I mean?
I know at Northside and Central, that would be school-wide learning outcome, that phrase would ring a bell, but.
That in order to understand school-wide learning outcomes, they have to understand the characteristics of an expert learner. So that expert learner terminology and
The
that's being
terminology, yes,
used,
but
right?
just hearing that name, expert learner,
Knowing that it ties, you're thinking.
It's like at
hearing that it
Central,
ties
if you
to-
ask a student at Central, what are your PBIS expectations, they would say, I don't know, but if you said what's CAPS, they'd say,
Right.
oh, Central's, you know, because
Right.
they've changed, or like at Schmidt, the 3Bs is kind of our tag phrase.
right. But if we said the school-wide learning outcomes, then they would know what the expert learner outcome, or qualities are.
Okay.
But they, if we just said, are you an ex, what are your expert learner qualities, they wouldn't.
And that may come from building to building, because they are using those specific
Some of it
terms.
is gonna depend on how the school-wide learning outcomes are rolled out in buildings.
Yeah.
But if we do our administrator interview first, like you usually do in the set, you'll know what they call it, so
Right.
then when you go and ask the teachers or the students, you'll be able to identify what their focus is. So that'll be important.
And that is one thing that it's not mentioned on here, we didn't ask as a clarifier ahead of time, but is there an administrator interview, is there a teacher interview, and then will there be a student interview also? And then is there, another thing for the set is that you go through like, if you select 3 random hallways to see if they have the PBIS expectations posted. So, you know, would you go to 3 random hallways to see if UDL
Yeah.
is
And who's
evident?
posting the UDL guidelines in the hallways, though? It'd
Right.
probably be classrooms.
Classrooms, yeah.
But it would be nice to say you're interviewing this percentage of teachers
Mhm.
and catching those teachers and saying, hey, what are the UDL guidelines, or
Yes.
you name.
Yes.
I think that would be beneficial, especially as facilitators, as we're spending time each month training. Is it hitting home? Are they retaining it? What do we really need to focus on?